understanding of equality under the law being expressed on both sides, because justice is not only a negative thing. He deserves justice. She deserves justice. It's a positive thing. And it's legally also a positive thing.
And it's also a moral thing.
Yes.
And I think we sometimes feel that because we give money, and we could have a whole sermon on how much easier it is to give money than to give time or effort, personal effort. But if we give money to organizations that foster good practice of social acceptance and justice, that we are doing at least something. And with our church, we have contributions to the conference and contributions to the district. But I would like to caution us about feeling that giving absolves us of personal responsibility. But Susan, I asked her if she could look at our budget and look at the district conference apportionments, and if we could determine what things are being supported now by the Methodist Church, and at least have some awareness of what our church is doing and how our money is being spent. So she has carefully and with great computer epicness produced a document for us to have. So that we were.
And it also asks for a breakdown of our church expenses in terms of different categories such as salaries, utilities, supplies, and so forth, different areas that are money is spent going into.
I think so. Oh, I thought we were there. Okay. I was just touching it down, but I couldn't just get up and bring over there.
I'm coming with you.
One more.
Okay. So Susan guided us through this first page.
The first page, of course, as you can see, reflects our budget amount. Our total budget for the whole year shows down at the bottom is $89,000 and some dollars. And of that, you can see the annual amounts designated toward paying salaries, extra benefits, utilities, supplies, and so forth. You can see that our apportionments for the year are almost $8,000, $7,998 that goes for apportionments. What you see in that final column, the one on the right, our expenses January through June, that is what we've already spent in all of those categories. And as you can see, the apportionments, we are today through June, we've paid 50% of the year's apportionment. We've also paid our $500 that we send to our ministries. You'll notice we haven't paid anything for Sunday school. Our Sunday school is free, I guess. We haven't charged us anything. We've had a contingency issue that probably will resolve itself by the end of the year. One thing that is interesting, if you look down at the bottom half of the page where it shows the income, and our normal budget offerings are shown in that first column, the restricted offerings, gifts toward either, could have been, well, it shows down at the bottom, music scholarship. There have been $3,000 just for the first half of the year designated toward music scholarship. And then the pastor's fund received $300, Encore received $36.70, and, let's see, that includes both 1 month, the designations were just for Encore, and the rest of the time it was for the international cause of Encore, which was of course Ukraine. So we have given $3,670 for the Ukraine need in the first half of the year.
That's great.
So I think that was commendable.
Yeah.
So y'all have questions about any of the categories? You might notice pastor benefits looks big because it's $20,000 budgeted for the year. That includes her housing allowance, which is, I think it's $800 and some a month, and her pension and health insurance, and the health insurance is quite expensive. So that's why that item is really high. For travel and continuing ed, Lisa has not turned in any charges to those two categories. So I think she has had some continuing ed, but it was based on some kind of conference scholarship or something, so she did not charge for that. And she doesn't turn in travel.
Doesn't turn in what?
Travel. She could, we budgeted something for travel, like $500, $600, something like that. But she has not turned in any travel.
So as a church, if you looked at us as an entity, we spend quite a bit on keeping the doors open and the place available and the operation of the church. So if we look at that, plus we give some in restricted categories to other funds. But if we are spending a lot on keeping the church going, then what should the church be concentrating on? Well,
I was about to say that in a Boy Scouts, our wonderful child development center would not exist without that money that's being spent, without what we are spending on this building. And I think we're pretty conscious of that. I hope we are. That I know the trustees are very conscious of making sure that the building is in a condition that can serve not only the congregation, but the community. And we have just changed the or the trustees have just changed the configuration of the sanctuary a little bit, so that we can truly welcome people who have physical disabilities. All that process, even keeping the restrooms clean, can be, and I really think the trustees are very conscious of it needing to be, for mission, even our outside, the memorial garden is morphing from simply a place where we put our ashes to a place where people can meditate. Anybody can meditate.
and I think we have a lot to celebrate about what we are doing, but I think there is always room for improvement. And I have watched several times as women with a small child come to our worship service and have no place for the child to be while they are in the worship service. schedule duty all the time, but I think we should arrange some kind of volunteer sign-up sheet that says, if a child comes, I will be happy to go to the nursery.
But not a baby. Sometimes they bring babies. You know,
If they keep
bottles
the baby,
around.
but I've seen them with 2-year-olds trying desperately to keep that 2-year-old quiet. That's a little bit.
Even kids,
Yes.
I mean, and you need 2 people, but you can get some school curriculum that you can pick up and use and not even know anything about it until you pick it up.
I have a question about the music. Not kids, the young people that come here from Marsville Music Conservatory. I thought you didn't pay for that. I thought Joel had set up sort of a scholarship program for this.
Those are paid out of the restricted funds that, to be honest, Joel provides.
Joel provides that.
He does.
Good.
Sometimes it's simpler to run things through the church budget category than to be a person paying them to do it.
Those $3,000 for the first 6 months of special offerings. There is one of some of this is confidential, and I don't feel comfortable talking about individuals. And normally, I don't see individual contributions. I do know that Joel and his family provide that, and the cost for the young people who come to sing solos has never exceeded those restricted offerings. So the church budget offerings have never gone uncovered.
That's good.
Any other questions about the first page?
Everybody know what all these funds are?
So you're talking about the second page?
Yeah.
No, we're going to that.
Okay.
The reason that I brought the computer was in case you want to question for what purpose any of those blueprint items are involved. Those come from the conference website, and I brought the computer so that, because they're blue, they're links, and you could go to any of those sites that you're interested in asking about. I was curious about the Episcopal Fund, because that sounded odd.
Yeah.
What is that? So I went to that one, and that provides funding for, I'll read it to you, the General Church Fund provides the salary and expenses of all active bishops and support of retired bishops and surviving spouses and minor children, blah, blah, blah. These expenses include salaries, Episcopal office expenses, I assume that's bishop's office expenses, partial support for maintenance of their residence, pension, health, and disability premiums, blah, blah, blah. So it keeps up the entire expenditure for the bishops. And that's the general church. That's more than just the conference. That's, I think, if I'm correct me, Lyle, if I'm wrong, but I think that's general church, something that goes even beyond Western North Carolina conference.
Not being a full-time Methodist for all of my life, I was surprised at the term bishop when I first joined the church here. We did not have bishops in the Baptist hierarchy.
They still do.
Yes, we did. They did not. So there is a considerable amount, if you look at this, about administrative district administrative fund. If you have an organization and it functions, I guess you need to have administrators, right?
If you want to run right. You'll notice those columns give the apportioned amount and how much we've paid and the balance due for the rest of the year. That's what those numbers indicate, as you can see.
Thank you for your work on this.
Yeah, well, all I did was Google, Google this. This one didn't take any work. The
Okay, anyway.
the conference supplies you with these students, they keep up with how much we are supposed to pay and how much we pay and how much we owe, so they know. And notice that they have given us credit for our $3,820 given toward Ukraine and international response, disaster response. So those funds, when you contribute those, they go in through our conference connection. So they go directly to the conference, and then the conference, I presume, sends them on to where they need to be. I like the Africa University Fund. I don't know why that particularly one appeals to me, but it does. And I think that's in, correct me, Wally, I'll let you know this, but I think they're in Zimbabwe.
Oh, Zambia, I think it's
The Africa University Fund is absolutely amazing. It was the first African university for all of Africa. If any of you know about Hutus and Tutsis who were real enemy peoples in Southern Africa, one of the things they did was to put Hutu and Tutsi students together as roommates. And as it turned out, the first ones that did that went back together to their people and said, look, this is what's possible. It has a theological seminary. The main seminary building is named after a past bishop of the South Carolina Conference, the Methodist Church, who happened to have been black. It is an amazing place.
Can I read you just a little short blog that came from this? Africa University is a private Pan-African and United Methodist related institution with over 1,200 students from 36 African countries. It is located 17 kilometers northwest of something I can't pronounce, Zimbabwe. It grants bachelor Zimbabwe.
That's the capital.
Mutare, M-U-T-A-R-E is where it's located. It grants bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees in various programs. So, Wikipedia.
My daughter-in-law Paige's grandfather and grandmother were Methodist medical missionaries in what was then called the Belgian Congo. And Paige's mother and her sister, her aunt, were born while they were there. Her pet was a monkey when she was a little girl. But anyway, I think the Belgian Congo is now called Zaire, I think. And that was the part of the country that they were in.
I went to Zimbabwe for a couple of weeks doing some American and Zimbabwe ophthalmologists. We were deep in the jungle about nothing was there, you know? But we would do about 100 cataracts a day. And after 3 days, we went home. And as we were driving away, people were coming up in droves and walking in the dirt, thinking they would have eye surgery. Just breaks your heart.
Wow. If you look at the amount there, the relative amount, the African University Fund gets $45 from what we give. Is that right, Susan? Mm-hmm. Okay, and we are supposed to give $28.88. 45 over $28.88 is not a big percentage. It's a token.
Can I say something about that though?
No.
You know, I'm not trying to negate your point, which is valid, but even that little bit means a lot. That money's worth a lot more over there than it is over here. Just to keep this in perspective. but you're right, it's not enough.
I will comment that when you go to the form to send in the apportionment, not this form, but the form that you send in each time you pay, the categories are listed, and you can elect to just check the top box, which means your donation, I guess it's a percentage of your total apportionment. Anyway, there's a general category you can check, or you can go down in the individual categories and specify how much you want of your apportionment you want to go to the different things. So you do have some control over that. Now, how that would be determined is another thing, because I might feel like it's more important to give $2,000 to the Africa University, because I think it's a really good cause. But Emily might not like that. She might like to give something else. Eugene might choose the World Service Fund, and somebody else might really like the Black College Fund. So I don't know how you would come down to changing those allocations.
Well, couldn't I, as an individual church member, say, I want to give $2,000 to the Black College Fund? And then, the bigger pile would be distributed as we normally would.
But then who would make that decision? And that's kind of tricky.
Can I say something to that? Is it possible that a survey could be sent out to the congregation with these categories and asking them what percentage of what, and that way, when the finance committee, whoever, however this goes to the bishop, or what do you call it, is it a jurisdiction, whatever it's called, or the district, this stuff, how we could actually tell them then at that time, we don't have to check the top box, we can actually, from our survey.
We can check at any point in time when we send in a contribution on our apportionment. We can check, if we wanted to, we can check the categories.
So that, we do it on a per apportion payment basis,
I assume so, because that's.
rather than, this is what we want for the year.
Well, you don't tell that to anybody, you just mark it when you send in your contribution.
Anyway, I think that's, might be good, something for us to explore, so as a congregation, we have a.
I think Judy and the administrative council would be the ones to determine.
Okay,
How
that's what I'm trying to get at, how do you do
Creating
this?
a nightmare, maybe.
And good luck on getting consensus.
Well, there won't be a consensus per se, but you can average it out. I think everybody should have, as a congregational member, we want to be invested in our congregation, this is one way to do it.
I think I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think one of the challenges with that is then defining, like, who is a member? Is it just those who are, like, truly members, or is it those who come? And then beyond that, you could get into, all right, well, of those members who gives, and of those who give, what percentage should they give, and should they get, it could get messy, I guess.
Well, if it's a matter of money, I would think it'd be of those who give.
I think you could
Money.
designate, if you want to, when you give your offering, if you wanted to give to 512, a certain amount, to the Episcopal Fund.
Please don't designate.
I would not that.
Please don't designate.
It
No,
does
no,
cost,
You
cost
just
a lot.
can't do that. If you
Yes.
start designating toward individual budget items, that would be unreal. I'm sorry, but it would be.
Yeah, keep track.
Also, if you designate toward that, then maybe you don't want to give toward Lisa's salary, so you don't give toward that. And then maybe you think the electric bill is too big, so you don't want to pay this extra air conditioning to an employee. I don't go against that. But to designate for individual budget offerings would make life extremely, extremely complicated.
And I think we don't understand what these terms mean in reality. We just see this. I'd like to know what the equitable compensation fund is.
We have gotten quite a bit of money from that one over time.
So it has helped us because we were a low budget
Yes.
church.
This fund uses salary grants to local churches that are unable to provide total funding for a pastor and their appointment. This fund is designed to provide grants on a 6-month basis, but no one church will receive funding over longer than a 3-year period, which we did, during which funding is reduced each year. I don't know if the grant that we've been getting comes from that. Heath, are you still in here?
It does. We've received that grant for 3 years. This is our last year, and this year we split half of that with Bright Hook Laurel. So this will be our last year. I think it was just over 3,000, something like that.
Our portion was $3,943 this year. So we do get something back from some of these things.
That other churches have given as part of their apportionment, and that word equitable is there again. What's the difference between equitable and equal?
Justice.
Yeah.
Maybe it's justice.
Could be justice, or at least some semblance of justice. You help the ones who need the help the most, right? Yes, yes.
Can I take a little side thought off the main thought? I also, and it's come to my attention recently, and there's really, what it boils down to, I'll give the boiling point and then spread it out, is there's no true ethical consumption under capitalism in the major throes of it. And it was brought to my attention recently with this Roe versus Wade overturning, because I received a list of all the companies who subscribe to politicians and paid politicians who were a part of this overturning, and it's all the major contributors. So like Walmart, Amazon, I think Target was in some of them, and I didn't realize, I had to more consciously think about like every step from a product going from its factory stage to my hand, how much it really changes someone's life, whether it's sweatshops creating the clothes we wear because fast fashion and quick overturns, or are they paying the farmers enough that are growing the vegetables that we put on our table if we don't get them locally? And do we pay them a living wage? And are these products harmful for the environment? And how far did it have to come to get here? And what kind of gas did that use? And what is it? So, and it's terrible to say that, you know, there's really no true way to ethically do daily life anymore. But we do have to be conscious about what kind of justice are we giving when we go to the grocery store, or when we go to Walmart, or buying birthday gifts for loved ones, or...
Can I write a check for $1,000 to go to such and so fund though, and send it individually, not through the church?
I don't know.
I would assume they would take money from that.
I would assume too. What'd you say?
I think they would take money no matter from where it came.
If you feel passionate about it.
Yeah. So there are ways, but this does represent the best, I guess, balance of the thinking people who are doing the budget thing. And I'm sure they could justify or give you reasons for most of these.
Would you ever add anything to this list, or take anything away, or is this like set in stone? Any of these funds?
I think it comes to us at this point.
I wish I printed this off. This is the blank form that we print out to send in, or send in electronically, whichever way you're doing. And how to make a payment. Auto allocation means entering your total payments on lines 400 and 500, which are the totals for each of those categories. It doesn't show up under the form, I think. So the form, line 400 is combined for all district funds. And so for us, we would put in, like if we're paying for half of the year, we put in 58.50 on that line, on the 400 line. And then, line 500 is the line for all of the conference and general church funds. district support, conference support, equitable compensation, mission and ministry, and so forth. And then if you don't wanna do that, you go to the individual items and put in how much you want to give of your apportionment, or how much you wanna give. There certainly will take more, I'm sure. And then there's a whole list of special payments, including Gibbons Estate, Building Teams, Project Agape, whatever that is, Encore Sunday, World Communion, Human Relations, Healing Day, Native American Awareness, Peace with Justice, Youth Service Fund, World Mission, Encore, and other amounts specified. That's on the remittance form that you send in.
Can I say one thing? I wonder if when I mentioned that suggestion about the survey, I may have given the wrong idea, because what I'm hearing, the message would be, it was just a matter of, the survey was not how much should we give to what and what we give, but to rate them in importance or percentages or something like that, because just to get a feel for where the congregation is, not to actually decide who's gonna get what. I didn't mean to do that. I just, and it just pops in my head because when JoAnn was mentioning how little it was that were given to the Africa University Fund, it's just, that's where I was going with it. It's not to decide who's gonna get what and how much, because you're right, that would be a mess. But just get an idea of, how the congregation feels this is more important or less important. And then the council or whoever, once they gets this information, rather than just checking the top box when they put in their apportionments, can mention, well, to make it fit whatever the congregation feels is important. It's not a matter of who's deciding what money has to go, and I didn't mean to do that.
I think it is important to recognize that most of us don't have a real good feel though for what these do represent. And we would need to have.
And we could send that out too somehow.
Or people
Yeah,
can
this
give
is for this.
on their own.
Or ask them to do it on their own.
If they want to, if someone is motivated to do that on their own. So.
Where would they look? Where would they look?
On the conference
Website?
right, Susan?
All that information is available on the conference site.
So, think about the needs that exist and how, if we really want to have the backing of an organization that hopefully has studied the question and has carefully determined these apportionments and the amount that is given to each. That's one safe way that we could at least initially give funds that would help to create a more just world. That's what I think many of these funds are trying for. They're trying to tip the giving toward equity, toward making people have a better opportunity, a better chance, a more meaningful life. But there's nothing that prevents us from giving on our own to other organizations and other places. We just need to get our heads around how much we have and how little the rest of the world has. And I include the people in our nation who are in desperate need.
That'll preach.
Will that preach? So keep your eyes open for somebody who doesn't have a seat at the table. There are lots of people that don't. And I think the work that we did through the school was very important because we gave materials and assets assets to the school, especially to the little kids who don't have what
They
they
have
need.
supplies, they don't have clothes.
And so we should not forget about that.
And I think that's our good representatives. They don't have representatives. Right.
I think that's an important point, and I also think that there are other ways in which our church, and I know it's an indirect way, but for example, I don't know whether the reason that Judy and Judy helped, I can't remember the name, Destiny so much, I don't know whether that came out of their relationship at church. Certainly got to know each other at church, but that was an example of helping someone who needed the help and didn't have a way to get it, and they helped her in other ways than just handing her money. It was a much more supportive kind of issue. Also, the people who worked at Haywood Street, people who worked at my sister's place, those are indirect effects of our church, because the people who did that were part of the church and truly were in some ways influenced or affected by the church. So that doesn't show up on these numbers. We can't say, well, Judy Morehouse did a whole lot of work and that was worth $500. Obviously, we can't do that, can't quantify. Methodist Women, the sale that they had in the spring, we brought in what, $1,500, $1,600, something like that, which will go to, I don't think it's been spent yet.
It hasn't been.
But it will go to some sort of causes, whatever they can amount to be, that relate to the kinds of justice that I think we're talking about. Shasta's job, I think, is somehow related to all of this. Her not church job, but her job.
Yes.
So there are a lot of little indirect spin-offs that can't come out in figures, and I think we need to work on those.
And even though this is not very much, but since he was so nice to talk about the sunflower art exhibit at the Episcopal Church, I have placed underneath that in a basket and on an easel some prints of my work and some cards. And they're selling at $10 a piece, and all of the money that church makes is going toward the Ukrainian effort through the Episcopal Church. And so I didn't contribute toward this encore figure, but I am trying to do something for the Ukrainians. I feel like that situation is just horrible, and I thought in this small way, maybe. And they've already told me I had to replace cards because they had sold all their cards, and so I put more over there.
Another thing, there are also some things that don't show up on these numbers because they happen in a previous calendar year. But sometimes when there are individual needs, there are contributions made through the church to help meet those individual needs.
There's a pastor's fund too, I can't remember what it's called. Discretionary fund.
Well, that and specific donations for specific individuals who were in a situation where they needed some help.
That's right. I remember I was serving the two churches in Spring Creek and Fines Creek when the conference made apportionments so that churches could adjust the figures. I mean, I remember when that switch happened. And it happened, I believe, because churches were struggling meeting apportionments, and there's less trust in institutions and those who field the institutions who set those budgets. And I am so grateful for the conversation about justice and do these funds create God's justice in the world that we so long to see and hear. And so I want to tell you I'm grateful for the conversation, and this conversation is happening in lots of churches all around the world, and Baptists have done it a lot. Baptists have done it so long, and the trends of wanting to invest in local ministries and things that you can see and feel and touch and know the impact is absolutely what everybody's asking, and because there's so much need. There's so much need in our community, there's so much need in our state, there's so much need in our nation. And so I'm gonna tell you how much I appreciate the struggle with this, and I put a little bit in the offering plate Sunday, and I'm grateful that you all are discussing it. I tend to trust these denominational bodies right now, and it is and it is because the United Methodist Church is going through a huge change right now, a huge change. And so I would encourage you to think about not scarcity but abundance. And there's a lot of abundance in this place. There's a lot of people can dig deeper, and we will if we're asked and told what it's needed for. I mean, that's my experience, is people need to be told what it's needed for, what it's going to, the worthy causes, and then people need to be thanked and said, we appreciate the work you've done. So I'll tell you, I appreciate the conversation, and let you know that it's a conversation lots of churches are having of how to pay the bills, how to keep the pastor. Gosh, y'all have gotten at least stable with your pastorate right now, which is terrific. And so I just thank you for the conversation. And when you finish it, I have something else I ask you to help me with, which I came in to share today.
And I agree with everything that Paula just said, and I think part of this has come over time due to the polarization across the United Methodist Church, with so many churches saying, like, wait a minute, that bishop supports this and says this, and I don't want to give to the Episcopal Fund because of that, or that bishop is living in a house that costs this much and makes this much, and we want to do that, and because of that polarization, they tried to find unique ways to adjust to that, and I might be wrong about this. I'd be really curious to hear what Wiley and Lisa's and others' thoughts are, even our district superintendent, and that may even be, if we're interested in this, it might be interesting to have a conversation with our district superintendent about how these things are decided, and the churches who make decisions to readjust their apportionments. But my hypothesis would be that the churches who make decisions to readjust their apportionments are probably churches that are also more likely to join the global Methodist Church, or not necessarily fully aligned with the current beliefs of the United Methodist Church. I may be very wrong about that, but I think it should be interesting to hear what our district superintendent and others might say.
May I add something? It's been a long time since I've looked at this list, like when I was the pastor at these two churches. There's some things not on here that I just thought of, like the National Council of Churches isn't showing on this list now. The North Carolina Council of Churches. If you want to be active in justice, the North Carolina Council of Churches is doing amazing work. And there are representatives on their board from United Methodist in North Carolina. So I think the list has changed over the years, this list, but this African University, it's been here ever since I've seen the list. And this Black College Fund, it's been here ever since I've seen the list. And the Ministerial Education Fund, that's needed. So, but I would support the list if I was a voting member. And may I ask one other thing? I learned this week that there was a United Methodist pastor in Memphis who was killed in a carjacking. I read religion news service articles, and it's the second pastor in this year that's been killed in Memphis. And so I brought a card and wanted to ask people to join me in sending a sympathy card to that church for the loss of their pastor. And then just this week, T. Anthony Spearman died, and his death is under investigation, and he was the chair of the North Carolina Council of Churches and an AME pastor in Greensboro. So I bought two. When I bought one, I bought two, and I invite you all to join me, and I'll mail the cards to these congregations or families. I don't know. I think T. Anthony is no longer a pastor. If you Google his name, he was the president of the NAACP, and there's some controversy around some of his civil rights stances. But both of these pastors are Black pastors. So if we want to act for justice, there are other things we can do other than spend money. Give money. There are lots of things we can do as a congregation to help make the world more just. And I brought these and invite y'all to sign them.
Thank you.
And looking close, like we were talking about, we don't have to always look abroad to help people. We can look around, and I have joined with the Baptist church, they do a wood ministry. And I had trees taken down, and so I offered them up and have been able to send wood, and I've got wood stacked up now that, Glenn Tucker has cut and has ready to go for people next winter. So things like that, you know, we can help each other, and it doesn't matter whether they're a Methodist or not, you know, we can help each other.
The firemen do that too. Fire station is.
Oh, do they?
Well, thank you, Susan, for providing this information. Yes, it's wonderful.
We don't know about these kind of things unless, and I would love to say.
Numbers are helpful, but they're not around. There's so many things that relate to justice that you can't qualify, can't show up on the spreadsheet.
If we want to work for justice, we missed the deadline, sign on to the Leandro case, which is an amicus brief, which our state has been challenged that they're not funding a predominantly black school district at the same level that white school districts are challenged. I've been a part of a group called Pastors for North Carolina Children, where that group is trying to advocate for equitable access to education for all across the state. There are lots of things we can do to make justice happen that aren't budget related, that are using our voice to speak to our legislators and make statements. And I just stirred a pot.
Okay, I guess it's time to go. These are
Busy couple days, home is gone, so it's quiet, and I don't have anybody say what's
They're also out of town, so I said, I didn't have money to have it, and so it's been in town, but I just have a pet parent.
Next year, that's sweet.
Yeah.
Oh, that kind of stuff.
Well, this one, that's how it's like a jumbo jet.
Yeah.
Because he's jet black. Every 5 minutes, you have a treat for me. I just need 10 minutes ago. And it for so long. I know.
I would greatly appreciate it because I have to be acolyte now.
Yes, good sir.
Thank you so much.
Did me and Phil say I work for the government Head Start program. Head Start program. Yeah, right on the edge of So my classrooms are outside in Sandhill, and then I also work in Black Mountain and Williams, which is like right outside of Black Mountain.
Margaret's sitting on the right.